So he's been sort of given a free home by this really wealthy media guy who probably knows George Soros in East Anglia for a year.
So it's clear he's well in with the elite, because he's getting looked after by them.
Now, so while he's living in East Anglia, which is this place not far from Norwich, he actually takes part in an episode of The Simpsons. He's featured on The Simpsons, and it is his real voice. So I'm just going to show the clip of The Simpsons episode that featured Assange's real voice. Let's just take a look at this.
I miss our home, and I want to go back.
It's not perfect here, but it is close to nature. And if you have an axe to grind, WikiLeaks is right over there.
How you doing, Mr. Assange?
That's my personal information, and you have no right to know about it. Hey, but we're neighbors. Would you like to come over for a movie sometime?
Is it Iraqi journalists being murdered?
Don't be ridiculous. It's an Afghan wedding being bombed.
Well, I've got a really big secret for you. I'm not wearing any underwear.
You know, you should really get out less.
Right, okay. Do you want to give a quick comment on the actual content of that first, Andrew, before we go on to
Well,
this?
we pointed out that he's not a very good actor, is he? So that's fairly obvious. But humour aside, I mean, there are some quite sinister overtones to it as well. And we could probably do a whole programme on the actual Simpsons itself as another type of psychological operation. That's a whole other story. But when you discussed that with me a while ago, but I think we're going to, you've obviously got some more information which I think proves that the people behind The Simpsons must be very well connected to people in the elite and the intelligence community.
One thing is definite, Assange agreed to take part in that Simpsons programme, and it was his voice in that programme. So he approved of that joke, making a joke about bombing an Afghani wedding.
Yeah.
Right. So I actually happen to know where Assange recorded the voice, because you say, well, he's living in the UK, he doesn't go to America anymore. How's he got a walk on part in The Simpsons? This is how. So this came from a Rich Planet viewer, and I'll read it all out. In the summer of 2007, 2 weeks before the financial crash was announced, I purchased the best known recording studio in Norwich, Purple Studios, in conjunction with a radio station that I was running. We recorded many artists, mostly local, but some more famous, such as the Manic Street Preachers. Yeah, Richie Edwards, he's still alive, by the way. In August of 2011, I received a phone call from an American woman who inquired about studio availability for the following week. She said that she was calling from Los Angeles and wanted to know if we could record an artist, but to record over ADSL to their studio in LA. We only had a basic broadband, and I explained that we had done similar things before over Skype, but recorded the files locally, and then we could send the file recording via digital means. She did not expand upon what the project was, but asked us to use discretion as this had to be kept secret. The following week came and went with no further contact. I thought it was a wind-up. But a few days later, she phoned again and apologised for not contacting us the previous week. Is the studio available for tomorrow night? She asked. I said yes. She gave me her details, and her name was Bonnie Patila. She said that the producer of a TV show would call me at 6 p.m. the following day to go through what was required. She also requested that only myself and my sound engineer could be on site, and that we were to keep quiet about the job as it was sensitive. This was very intriguing. What could it be? My sound engineer and I waited the following day, not knowing what was going on or who was going to walk through the door. At 6 p.m. the phone rang, and an American man introduced himself as Al Jean, the producer of The Simpsons. He explained that we were to record a voiceover for one of the characters for the show, the 500th episode as it turned out, and that he, Al Jean, would direct him over Skype. We still did not know who the voiceover was, but it had become very exciting. At 7 p.m, a black car pulled up outside and a man came to the door. We confirmed that it was the correct location and the man had a quick look around, probably checking that it was just myself and the sound engineer. He then returned to the car and came back in with a woman and Julian Assange. We locked the doors behind everyone and prepared for the session. The woman turned out to be Assange's press agent, and she had the script that Julian Assange was going to read from. Al Jean spoke to the woman and Julian Assange over the phone, and I explained that Mr. Assange would be in the recording booth whilst we would all be in the control room. I spent the next hour on the phone to Al Jean, relaying his directions to the sound booth whilst we listened to Assange reading his script. Do that line again with a bit more gusto, and more emphasis on the "that's my personal information and they have no right to know about it," etc. So he was even directed for that really poor piece of acting. Can you believe it? Right. It was a very, very strange experience all round. Julian Assange was a very strange individual. He was even taller than me, and he had a very strange aura about him, which actually made me feel a bit uneasy. He did not make any casual conversation. I wanted to ask him about WikiLeaks, as it was big news at the time due to the allegations of sexual harassment by Sweden, but I did not feel at all comfortable talking to him. I knew from the news that Assange was being held in house arrest in Suffolk, and the fact that he was in my building meant that I was in fact harbouring a wanted criminal. At the time, I believed that he was one of the FBI's most wanted men. Hence the secrecy. But obviously we know he's living in some mansion house, driving around in a car. He's clearly not a wanted man. If you do any search for Julian Assange, The Simpsons, it will say that the voiceover was recorded during house arrest at an undisclosed location near London. It was in fact in Norwich. Articles such as this one on Wikipedia and this one here also state that the producers of The Simpsons did not know the location and were only given a phone number to call, which is obviously untrue because they were the ones who reached out to us and booked the studio. So they're saying officially that they spoke to Assange on just some telephone number and they didn't know where he was, someone's driven him to the studio with his PR agent, and they've actually booked the studio.
Yeah, yeah. So it's a total setup, you know. I mean, top to bottom.
Yeah. So he's a handled entity.
Yes. Yeah. He's protected. He's managed. He has a press, officer or whatever press, secretary or however you describe.
So the fact that they have to make up a lie that we don't know where he was when we recorded that for The Simpsons. It was somewhere, some secret place, thus perpetuating the myth that he's a wanted man and he's kind of in hiding in house arrest or whatever.
And just by listening to the quality of the audio, you can tell it wasn't recorded on a phone. They don't have him speaking down a phone in the Simpsons episode. They have him at a campsite, don't they, or something, is it, in the scene.
Yeah, it just says, it will say that the voiceover was recorded during house arrest at an undisclosed location near London. So it doesn't say what technology was used, but it's somewhere where they didn't know where it was, which is clearly a lie. The whole affair was recorded within 2 hours. They all left. I had been asked by Al Jean, Bonnie Patila, and the woman who accompanied Assange not to talk about what had happened as they needed to keep the whole thing under wraps. When they had left, my sound engineer and I agreed that it probably wasn't a good idea to talk to anyone about it, as it could have implications for us with the US intelligence agencies. Plus I was running my Big Brother website and a bit of paranoia kicked in. So this chap's actually into alternative subjects, and he's posted some of my videos on his website. The fact of the matter that he was under house arrest and was trying to be extradited to the US by the American government. I'm not sure if that's correct, mind, by the extradition request. We'll come on to that. Assange broke his house arrest and travelled to Norwich, to my recording studio, which kind of meant that we were complicit to the fact. Should we have informed the authorities? The people that organised it have covered their tracks so that there is no mention of the location and have stated that they had no idea and only had a phone number. we thought it best to follow suit and keep stum. They obviously had a better grasp of the gravity of the situation than myself. The 500th episode of The Simpsons aired in February 2012, by which time I had quietly leaked the story to a very few close friends. They also thought it was a good idea to keep the entire situation under my hat. To this day, only a handful of people know this story. So there it is. I don't know if this is of any use to you, but this is my story as it happened. It was a strange, secretive meeting, and it left me feeling uneasy. Julian Assange left me feeling uneasy. He was, as my old art college tutor would describe, as a strange cove. It was as though he was all-important and kind of looked through us. An almost non-human aura about him, which sounds ridiculous, but he left me feeling very strange and uneasy. So,
well, that again all adds up to him being managed, and if he was indeed in this cult, as we, have sort of alluded to, that aura may have come or may have been generated by the activities that the cult, indulged in.
Mm-hmm. And we've spoken about these rape allegations from Sweden. Let's just come on to that, because I think that is why he's under some sort of house arrest. And there's an ongoing allegation, he claims not made by the person who was allegedly raped, by the police. And they've sent a request to question him, which has never happened, right? So he's not allowed to leave the UK apparently, right? So this is the current situation as I understand it. You've got two supposed entities want him, which is the Swedish police for some rape allegation, and the US government. But when you hear the allegations that the US have made against him, they say that it's a US secret grand jury investigation and impending prosecution. They never say prosecution. It's an impending prosecution. So they're still investigating him, right? So this has been going on for years and years. They've never said, right, he's guilty, we're going to issue the extradition request. As far as I'm aware, there's no extradition request from the US. It's just this ongoing impending prosecution and grand jury investigation. But the way that the legal situation is that the Ecuadorian embassy have given him asylum because of the US situation. So they're saying, well, we don't agree that he should be taken to the US and put on trial because he's actually doing a good thing by leaking these documents. So we are going to give him asylum in Ecuador. So really he should go to Ecuador. The reason why he's not gone to Ecuador is because the British government are saying, right, you can't leave the UK until you have been interviewed by the Swedish government or by the Swedish police, because you might escape that prosecution by leaving our country. So the Ecuador government say, well, okay, well, he'll live in the Ecuadorian embassy. So you've got this ridiculous situation which has gone on for 4 years, where he comes out onto his balcony and where is he? He's in the media capital of the world, London, where people have got access to him, and he's got a platform there. Right?
Absolutely, literally, yeah.
And
but also he says in the interview with Pilger that the Swedish government or the Swedish police have cleared him. They've said that they don't believe the allegations of rape anyway. Mm-hmm. So if he gets extradited to Sweden, he'll be immediately extradited from there to the US. That's what he says in the Pilger interview. Yeah. So again, it's all
well, he does say that that's the reason why he doesn't go to Sweden in order to be interviewed, is because he thinks the Swedish government would extradite him. Right. So why doesn't he think the UK government would extradite him?
That's it.
You've also got other possible links to Sweden with, he's said that he's placed his servers in Sweden in the past because of he says that they have good laws on freedom of speech. So we've got these 4 players. We've got the UK, Sweden, the US, and Ecuador. So the point I'm making is that I've said this in my lecture, that Ecuador have got very good relations with the United States. They're not some rogue state that would want to undermine the US by helping WikiLeaks leak their documents. They're an ally of the US. So I don't believe that they're doing this against the wishes of the US government. I believe they're doing it so that he's then got some legitimate place, a platform from which to speak to the London media.
And to present this illusion that he's under threat,
Yeah.
you know, but he's not really.
No.
And you ask what other questions. I think he's been there for, what, 5 years or 7 years or something, isn't it?
I think it's approaching 5 years, I believe.
So who's paying who's paying for him to be there? Who's supporting him? Who's paying for his board and lodgings? And
that's the other thing we haven't come on to.
Right,
the funding issue.
and I think Pilger asks him in this interview. He asks him, where do you publish the documents from? Because there's this question: is he sat at a laptop in the Ecuadorian embassy, managing the website and receiving all these documents? Blah blah blah. And it's claimed in the Pilger interview that the Ecuadorian government have cut the internet link to the embassy, so that he can't use it, presumably. But then Assange has said something that doesn't really matter, because he says in this Pilger interview, we publish from France, Germany, Netherlands, and a number of other countries. So that right there says there must be a group of them, there must be a team of them. So my question then is, okay, so it's not just Assange publishing these documents, it's got people helping him. So why aren't they, why haven't they been grabbed by the US government? Why aren't they under investigation if it's really such a problem? And how have they been able to set up this international network? I'd like to know more about that.
Yeah, and the other interview that people might want to watch is by Democracy Now! Amy Goodman,
yes,
who went into the embassy. Now, I remember that programme. It used to be on Edge Media Television. And I watched it now and again, thinking that it was an alternative news programme, but it's absolutely not, because she doesn't ask him any of the right questions. So both the Pilger interview and the Democracy Now! Interview, I'll just read out what I've written here. What they're doing is they're promoting what I call a classic phony bone of contention.
Yes.
Because their arguments that they're having, or the point that their discussion contains a probably flawed assumption. And that flawed assumption, which is the information which is being leaked, is it being leaked for leaking's sake, or is it not a psyop or an attempt to control the alternative media? So the contention assumes that WikiLeaks is what it purports to be, right? So they have this argument over, is it ethically right what you are doing, or should you be stopped from leaking documents? That's the argument that they have in these. Well, is John Pilger mainstream? I don't know what he is, right? But why hasn't he asked Assange about his childhood? Why hasn't he got to the bottom of the funding?
Yes.
Why isn't he asking all the questions that we are asking in this interview?
Exactly.
Right? Why is he just taking as read that WikiLeaks is what it purports to be, and then helping big up WikiLeaks' name in the world by having that argument? Oh, well, by leaking that, you're putting people's lives at risk, Julian. You are a threat, or are you really for getting the truth out?
That's it. And I mean, most of the Pilger interviews centres around what we were discussing earlier about how WikiLeaks is influencing the US election. That's essentially the theme which runs through the Pilger interview. And as I said earlier, he even backs up this idea that the Saudis are funding ISIS and ISIL terrorism through the Clinton Foundation. That's mentioned. And so it's pretty much mainstream stuff. It's not really going outside any of this territory really that they're normally in. It's just that Julian Assange is sort of being looked at as something which sits in between the political parties and is essentially compromising the operation of both those political parties. In the US particularly.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that he says in the Amy Goodman interview is that he hasn't had any light for years in the Ecuadorian embassy. He's in a room without any daylight. What is the Ecuadorian embassy not got windows? Huh? Well, he can't sit near a window.
No, exactly.
It's just bollocks.
Yeah,
it is bollocks.
Yeah. And the other thing which he mentions in the Amy Goodman interview, I think there may be more than one Amy Goodman interview actually. It's the one that I watched. She's not at the embassy. He's been interviewed over Skype, so she's not actually there. But he mentions in that interview, again, another of these little things that tweaked me, was he talks about Naomi Klein and how Naomi Klein is talking about climate change, but the climate change is an important issue. Again, he doesn't say that climate change is another scam. And he could just say that if that's, he should know that. He should know, if he's an intelligent person, he's looked at the evidence, he should know that the climate change issue is another scam which is being used to control people, but he doesn't say that. So again, he's promoting mainstream views.
Another thing that he states in the Amy Goodman interview is that that the UK police are surveilling him, obviously because they don't want him to leave the country because of the Swedish thing, supposedly. And that is costing the UK police £15,000 per day to surveil the Ecuadorian embassy.
Yeah.
So how would he know that?
Yeah.
Why would they tell anyone
Right,
that?
that's right, yeah.
Now, another person who has championed WikiLeaks is Annie McKinnon, who's the former MI5, the former handler of David Shayler. Sorry, the former girlfriend of, did I say handler? Sorry,
I think you did, yes.
The former girlfriend of David Shayler. Yeah, she who used to work for MI5. Used to. Doesn't work for them now, apparently.
No, I don't think she does.
No, not anymore. Not
anymore, I don't
But she
think.
champions WikiLeaks.
Apparently she does, yes.
Yeah, and I think she was there at the statue of Assange in Germany. Oh, Julian, we've got a statue of you now.
Wow. Well, that's pretty good. Maybe she was hoping they'd make one of her. Who knows?
Hope not. Okay, so shall we come on to the funding?
Why not?
Okay, which is another red flag. Assange has claimed that Visa, MasterCard and PayPal have all blocked payments to his organisation. Right? So how does he still get funding? Now, this guy we mentioned earlier, John Young, has made comments about the funding, and there's a quote on page, there's a few quotes in Daniel Estel's book. Let's just read a few quotes.
And as again, people can go to the Cryptome website and get more of these because there's a fair breakdown there.
The linchpin of WikiLeaks' financial network is Germany's Wow Holland Foundation. Mr. Assange said WikiLeaks gets about half its money from modest donations processed by its website, and the other half from personal contacts, including people with some millions who approach us. But that's not their only source of funding, according to email exchanges. Acquiring covert funding from intelligence agencies was also contemplated. Right, so they contemplated getting funding from intelligence agencies. Let me just read this other one on page 51. Apparently, John Young claims, this comes allegedly from a WikiLeaks insider, we don't know who, that up until April 2010, the total donations were $243,896. So that's just over 3 years. That's about £73,000 a year. But Assange claims it takes $200,000 just to keep the lights on and $600,000 to be fully funded. Right.
Yeah,
So it's not possible, if these figures are correct, for them to have survived through the donations they've had from this WikiLeaks insider. So they're getting money from somewhere else then.
Yeah.
And I'm not aware of any accounts ever being published. This is an organisation which goes on about being open and transparent and releasing everyone's private information, but doesn't produce any financial accounts or audits on its own organisation.
Right. Yeah, that's the situation.
Mm-hmm.